My name is Major Hiroshi Tanaka, Japan Air Self-Defense Force. Call sign Tora. Over 3,200 hours on the Mitsubishi F-2, Japan's superior evolution of the F-16, with advanced avionics and maritime strike precision. I've led squadrons from Naha, Okinawa, facing real threats daily. Hundreds of scrambles against Chinese J-20s and J-16s probing the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, shadowing Russian bombers, providing overwatch in tense South China Sea multinational operations where simulations turned hot. I've maneuvered in environments where missiles could fly at any moment, sharp, peer-level combat against a numerically superior adversary. No endless occupations like the Americans in Iraq or Afghanistan. We defend with precision, without waste. Undefeated in exercises, legendary kill ratios. Young pilots idolize my disciplined style. Restraint, perfection, no reckless risks. The Japanese way wins through superiority and control. When Tokyo ordered me to this advanced training exchange at Nellis, I smirked inwardly. The Americans needed lessons from us. Their pilots logged hours bombing insurgents in pickup trucks. Impressive endurance, perhaps, but against inferior foes. Their Vipers? Reliable, but older blocks compared to our integrated systems. Peacetime and strict rules of engagement have softened them. We face China every day. We are sharper. I arrived expecting to dominate, to show these cowboys what real modern air power looks like. The base felt chaotic, vast hangars, casual pilots joking around, no crisp discipline. Then I met Lieutenant Colonel Michael Mike Reynolds, my lead instructor. Tall, calm, mid-40s, with quiet eyes and a disarming smile. He extended a hand. Major Tanaka, Hiroshi, call me Mike, welcome. No formality, too humble. I nodded curtly, thinking, another polite bureaucrat with faded combat stories. The brief was short. 2 weeks of intensive basic fighter maneuvers, dissimilar air combat, pushing the F-16 to its absolute limits, things our domestic syllabus rarely permits due to risk management. We'll make each other better, Mike said evenly. I thought they'll learn from me. As night fell over the desert, confidence burned in me. I was the best pilot here, unbeatable. But in the 7 days of flying that followed, that arrogance would be systematically dismantled. I had flown against real adversaries for years, only to realize here, in America, that I had been flying the wrong way all along. This is my confession, from pride to painful humility. Day 1, cockpit culture shock. The first morning at Nellis began with a dry, scorching wind blowing across the flight line. I stepped out of the visiting officer's quarters in my JASDF flight suit, patches crisp, boots polished, ready to make an impression. The American pilots around me wore faded Nomex, sunglasses perched on their heads, coffee cups in hand, laughing about something from the night before. No formation, no formal roll call, just casual chatter as they walked toward the squadron building. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was already judging. This is the world's most powerful Air Force? Mike Reynolds greeted me at the door with the same easy smile from the day before. Morning, Hiroshi. Ready to get after it? I nodded sharply. Yes, sir. Ready. He chuckled softly. Just Mike is fine. We filed into the briefing room, a plain space with folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a single projector. No elaborate slides, no long safety lectures, no recitation of emergency procedures. Mike stood at the front, clicked once, and a simple diagram of 2 F-16s merging head-on appeared. Today's objective, he said, is 1v1 basic fighter maneuvers. We're going to see where you are, then build from there. No grades, no ego, just learning. I almost smirked. Learning? From them? The other pilots, my opponents for the week, introduced themselves casually. Razor, a captain with a cocky grin. Viper, a quiet major. Joker, a female lieutenant who looked barely out of pilot training, all younger than me, all with far fewer hours. I had more combat scrambles in 1 year over the East China Sea than most of them had in their careers. We stepped to the jets. The ground crew was efficient, but again, no rigid protocol. A crew chief slapped the side of the fuselage and said, "Have a good one, sir." No deep bow, no meticulous pre-flight ritual. I climbed the ladder into the cockpit of a Block 50 F-16C, familiar yet subtly different from my F-2 back home. Older avionics, no J-APG-1 AESA radar, no AAM-4 integration. Still, the Viper is the Viper. I knew it better than anyone here. Taxi, takeoff, climbed to the working area over the Nevada Test and Training Range. The sky was limitless blue, the desert floor a tan blur far below. I felt at home. This was my element. First engagement, neutral merge against Razor. I flew exactly as I had for years. Defensive mindset from the start, conserve energy, maintain large safety margins, keep the jet clean. Smooth, precise turns at 7G maximum, AOA well below departure, always retaining enough airspeed for a quick disengagement if needed. Textbook Japanese BFM. Survive first, win second. Razor came at me aggressively. He bled energy hard, pulled into high AOA early, nose authority wild. The jet looked unstable, on the verge of departure. I thought, amateur. He'll bleed off too much speed and I'll reverse him easily. But he didn't. His Viper snapped around faster than I expected, nose pointing at me while I was still in a predictable rate fight. I defended, extended, re-engaged, and found him already inside my turn circle again. Fox 2. Guns. Fox 2. 3 merges, 3 kills against me. I landed after the first sortie in silence. My hands were steady, but inside irritation simmered. Not anger, I was too disciplined for that, but a quiet dismissal. He got lucky. Aggressive flying works against cautious opponents once or twice, but not consistently. Real combat isn't a knife fight, it's chess at Mach 1. Debrief was in the same plain room. No raised voices, no humiliation. Just HUD footage on the screen. Mike paused the tape at the first merge. "Hiroshi, talk me through your plan." I explained calmly. Energy conservation, defensive positioning, waiting for him to make a mistake. Mike nodded, then asked Razor the same. Razor shrugged. I wanted to get inside his turn radius fast, force an overshoot, then saddle in. Mike turned to me. "You flew it perfectly, by your book. Clean, predictable, safe. But you were slow. You never made him react to you. He dictated the fight from the merge." Slow. The word stung more than I let show. He clicked to another frame. My jet in a smooth 7G turn. Razor's in a ragged 9G pull, buffeting visibly. "You kept beautiful parameters. He didn't. Yet he won. Why?" I had no answer. Not yet. The afternoon was simulator time. Unlimited engagements, no G limits, no risk. I flew the same way. Precise, disciplined, safe. I lost almost every fight. Razor, Joker, even the quiet Viper, all of them outmaneuvered me consistently. Not because they were smoother or more precise. They weren't. Their jets departed, recovered, departed again. They bled energy to nothing, then fought in the phone booth. They accepted positions I would never take because they were unsafe. After the last sim run, I sat staring at the frozen screen. Another guns kill against me. Mike pulled a chair beside me, voice low. "You're one of the most technically proficient pilots I've ever seen. Your formations are flawless, your energy management textbook. But you're flying the jet too carefully. That's why you're slow." Too carefully. In Japan, careful is the highest praise. It means disciplined, responsible, professional. Here it was apparently an insult. He leaned in. "Why are you afraid of your own aircraft?" The question landed like a slap. Afraid? I had flown through typhoons, intercepted armed intruders at night, led 4 ships in low-level maritime strikes. I had more real-world tense engagements than most of these pilots combined. I opened my mouth to protest, then closed it.
The data didn't lie. I had been outflown, badly, by younger, less experienced opponents. That night, back in my room, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The desert air was cool through the open window, but I felt hot with something I hadn't felt in years: doubt. For the first time, a small crack appeared in the armor of certainty I had worn for 2 decades. Was my discipline actually caution? Was my precision actually hesitation? I told myself it was only day 1, plenty of time to turn this around. Tomorrow, I would show them what a real combat-experienced pilot could do. But deep down, Mike's question echoed. Why are you afraid of your own aircraft?
Day 2. Misunderstanding Safety. I woke before the alarm, the desert night still clinging to the room. Sleep had come in fragments, haunted by replays of yesterday's merges. Razor's Viper always 1 step ahead, my own jet lagging behind like a reluctant partner. Mike's question still rang in my ears. Why are you afraid of your own aircraft? Ridiculous. I wasn't afraid. I was disciplined. I was professional. But the doubt had taken root. Breakfast was quiet. I sat alone with black coffee, reviewing mental notes. Today I would adjust. A little more aggressive off the merge, tighter turns, higher G when needed. I would show them that experience and precision always prevail over reckless energy bleeding. The morning brief was short. More 1v1 BFM, offensive and defensive starts, push the jet, learn the edges. Push the jet. I almost rolled my eyes. We launched in 2 ships. My opponent today was Joker, the young lieutenant who barely looked old enough to shave. Fewer than 800 hours total, most of it in the F-16. In Japan, she would still be in advanced training under close supervision. Here, she was cleared for unlimited BFM against a visiting major with real-world scrambles. Neutral merge, 450 knots, 20,000 feet. I came off the line hot, determined to dictate the fight from the start. Early turn into her, rate fight at 7.5 G, conserve energy for the vertical if needed. Textbook offensive BFM, exactly how I had taught it for years. Joker didn't play the rate game. She pulled straight up, bled airspeed aggressively, then rolled and pointed her nose down at me in a high AOA lag pursuit. Her jet buffeted hard, stick shaker rattling. I thought, she's departing, overshot. But she didn't overshoot. She recovered just enough energy to saddle in behind me as I continued my predictable turn. Fox 2, kill. Second merge, defensive start for me. I broke hard into her, unloaded to extend, then re-engaged vertically. Solid energy management, safe parameters. She accepted a head-on pass at high closure, then pulled into a near vertical climb, trading all her speed for altitude and nose position. The Viper looked unstable. Departure region, high AOA, low energy. Suicide in real combat, I thought. Yet somehow, as gravity brought her down, her nose was already tracking me. Guns track, kill. Third merge, fourth, fifth. Every time the same pattern. I flew clean, efficient, survivable parameters. She flew on the ragged edge, 9G sustained, AOA spiking into departure warning, energy down to corner speed and below. Her jet shook, groaned, complained. Mine flew like glass. And every time she won. By the end of the sortie, I had 1 draw and 4 losses. My pride was intact on the outside. Calm voice on the radio, professional landing, but inside, frustration boiled over into something close to anger. Debrief again in the plane room. HUD tapes rolling. Mike paused on a frame where Joker's jet was deep in buffet, AOA needle pegged high. "You saw this and thought she was out of control, right?" he asked me. I nodded. "Unstable parameters, high risk of departure. In real combat, that's a death sentence." Razor leaned back in his chair. "Maybe against a bad pilot, but against someone who knows the jet intimately, that's where the magic happens." Mike zoomed in on my trace. Smooth, beautiful energy curve. Never below 350 knots, never above 8G, AOA always comfortable. You kept the jet happy, you kept large margins, you kept safe, and you lost every fight. He let that hang in the air.
Then he said the words that struck deeper than any yesterday. Safety doesn't mean avoiding the edge. Safety means knowing the edge better than the enemy. I stared at the screen. My perfect, disciplined flying looked suddenly timid, conservative, defensive. In Japan, we train to survive first. We face numerical superiority every day. Chinese flanks can outnumber us 5-1. The doctrine is clear. Preserve the force, fight smart, disengage if necessary, live to intercept tomorrow. Risking the jet and pilot for a marginal kill ratio is irresponsible, or so I had always believed. Joker spoke up quietly. Major, you're smooth as hell, but you never made me defend. I always knew what you were going to do next because you stayed in the safe box. I could gamble because you wouldn't punish my mistakes. Punish mistakes. That phrase lodged in my mind. Back home, we avoid creating opportunities for mistakes, ours or the enemy's. Here, they deliberately fly into positions where a mistake could end the fight, trusting their feel for the jet to recover and capitalize. Afternoon was more sim time. Unlimited gas, unlimited lives. I tried to adapt. A little more aggressive, pulled to 8.5 G once or twice, allowed AOA higher than usual. Won 2 fights against Viper. He was more conservative than the others. But against Razor and Joker, I still lost most. One engagement stood out. Defensive start. Razor came in hard. I broke into him, then unloaded and extended. Classic. He followed, bled energy to stay with me, ended up slow and low. I reversed hard, thinking, now I have him. But he accepted the low energy state, pulled into a near-stall nose-high turn, and somehow, through rudder, throttle, and precise recovery, floated the nose onto me before I could complete my reversal. Kill. I sat back in the sim pod, breathing hard, not from G, but from the realization. He had willingly entered a regime I considered forbidden, low speed, high AOA, near departure, and come out winning. I had stayed safe and lost. That evening I skipped the squadron bar. I walked the flight line alone as the sun set, watching ground crews tow jets into hangars. The desert wind was cooling, carrying the faint smell of JP-8. For the first time in my career, I questioned the foundation of everything I had built my reputation on. Was my revered discipline actually fear disguised as wisdom? Was my perfect safety record not a strength but a limitation? Mike's words echoed again. Safety doesn't mean avoiding the edge. Safety means knowing the edge better than the enemy. I had spent 20 years staying as far from the edge as possible, and today, younger, less experienced pilots who danced on that edge had dominated me completely. I returned to my room, sat at the small desk, and opened my flight logbook. Pages of flawless sorties, perfect scores, commendations for outstanding airmanship and risk management. Suddenly, those entries looked hollow. The first real crack had appeared, not just in my confidence, but in the philosophy I had lived by and taught others. Tomorrow would be worse, I suspected. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it would be the beginning of something better.
Day 3. The problem wasn't technique. Morning brief on day 3 was different. No flying scheduled until afternoon. Instead, Mike announced a full data review session. Telemetry, HUD tapes, and performance envelopes from the first 2 days. I arrived early, notebook in hand, ready to defend my adjustments. I had pushed harder yesterday, higher G, slightly higher AOA, and won a few fights in the sim. Progress, I told myself. They would see that experience and adaptation would close the gap. The room filled slowly. Razor, Joker, Viper, a few other instructors. Mike stood at the front with a laptop connected to a large screen. "We're not here to critique stick skills," he began. "We're here to look at the jet's story, what it was capable of, and what it was actually allowed to do." He pulled up my telemetry overlay first. A clean blue trace. Airspeed never below 330 knots in turning fights. G peaking at 8.2 G. AOA rarely above 15 degrees. Smooth, efficient, textbook energy management. Then he overlaid Razor's trace in red. Chaos by comparison. Airspeed dipping to 180 knots multiple times, sustained 9G pulls, AOA spiking to 25 degrees and beyond, multiple departures and recoveries. The red trace dominated the blue in every engagement. Mike zoomed in on a single merge. Hiroshi, your line is perfect. Energy retention outstanding. You could have flown that turn for 10 minutes without flaming out. I nodded. That was the point. But look what that perfection cost you. He advanced the tape. My smooth turn allowed Razor to cut inside with a high AOA slice, trading energy for nose position. You never used more than 75% of the F-16's corner performance. You kept a massive buffer, 150 knots above corner, 2G below max, always. He wasn't wrong. I had always maintained those buffers. It was drilled into us. Never let airspeed decay below a certain threshold. Never pull to blackout G. Never enter the departure region unless absolutely necessary. Preserve the jet, preserve the pilot. He switched to a polar diagram, the F-16's sustained and instantaneous turn rate versus airspeed in G. My data points clustered safely in the center of the envelope. Razors danced all over the edges, sustained 9G at corner velocity, instantaneous pulls beyond, high AOA low-speed regimes. You're flying a 9G jet at 7G parameters, he said quietly. You're flying a 30-degree AOA jet at 15 degrees. The aircraft can do so much more, and you're not asking it to. I shifted in my seat. Risk management. In Japan, we face numerical inferiority daily. We cannot afford to lose aircraft or pilots to training accidents or over-aggressive maneuvering. We preserve capability for the real fight. Mike nodded respectfully. I get it. Force preservation is critical when you're outnumbered. But here's the question. Does staying safe in training produce pilots who can win when outnumbered? Silence in the room. He pulled up historical data, not classified, just open-source studies on air combat outcomes from Vietnam to the Bekaa Valley to modern simulations. The pattern was consistent. Pilots who trained aggressively, who routinely explored the edges of the envelope, achieved higher kill ratios in actual conflict. Pilots who trained conservatively, even if technically flawless, were more likely to lose the first critical merge. Joker spoke up. Major, your flying is beautiful, but it's predictable. Because you stay in the safe zone, I always know your next move. I can take risks you won't. Razor added, and when I make a mistake in that risk, I recover because I practice recovery every day. You don't, so if you ever get forced into that regime in real combat, it'll be the first time. The words landed heavily. Then Mike showed the difference in training philosophies side by side. Japanese syllabus, from open sources and my own input, strict limits on G, AOA, minimum airspeeds in training, mistakes heavily penalized, focus on procedural perfection and error avoidance. American syllabus, deliberate practice at the edges, controlled departures, recoveries, high AOA maneuvering, sustained 9G, mistakes expected and debriefed deeply. Focus on understanding why something failed so it can be mastered. In Japan, I said, defending instinctively, we cannot accept mistakes. One accident can end a career, damage international perception, cost billions in lost aircraft. Mike didn't argue. He just asked, and how many of your pilots have ever intentionally departed an F-16 in training? How many have practiced recovery from out-of-control flight? I thought of my own career. 0. Departures were failures, reportable incidents. Here, he continued, we do it regularly, in controlled conditions, with spin shoots if needed in older blocks, but mostly just knowing the jet. Because in combat, the enemy won't respect your safety margins. They'll force you into the corner. He paused the presentation on a single frame. My jet in a perfect level turn, Razors in a near vertical high AOA pull. Then he said the sentence that finally broke through my defenses. You don't trust the jet. That's your real problem. Not technique, not experience, trust. I had spent 20 years treating the F-16, or my F-2, as a precision instrument that must be controlled absolutely, never allowed to deviate, a machine that could betray me if I let it. They treated it as a living partner that would respond faithfully if you listened to its feedback. Afternoon flying was 2v2, me and Viper, the quiet one, against Razor and Joker. I tried to incorporate the morning's lessons, pulled harder off the merge, allowed airspeed to decay lower, accepted a higher AOA slice once. We won one engagement, barely, lost the next 3. But something was different. When I pushed closer to the edge, the jet responded. It didn't depart when I expected. It gave me nose authority I never used.
For a fleeting moment in one fight, I gained angles on Joker and forced a defensive turn. She still killed me in the end, but it was closer. Debrief was short. Mike simply said, "Better. You're starting to ask the jet questions instead of telling it what to do." That evening, I didn't walk the flight line. I sat in my room with a printed copy of the F-16 flight manual, the unclassified envelope diagrams. I had studied them years ago, but always as limits to avoid, not capabilities to exploit. For the first time, I looked at the high AOA region, not with apprehension, but curiosity. I thought about my students back home. How many times had I reprimanded a young pilot for pulling too hard, for letting airspeed decay, for endangering the aircraft? How many had I taught not to trust the jet? Mike's words kept circling. You don't trust the jet. And the deeper truth beneath it, I didn't trust myself to handle what the jet could truly do. Day 3 ended not with anger or frustration, but with a quiet unease. The foundation was cracking wider now. My technical proficiency, my greatest pride, was not the issue. The issue was deeper, philosophical, almost spiritual. I had mastered control. I had never mastered partnership. Tomorrow, they promised, we would push the limits for real. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but for the first time in 20 years, I wanted to find out.
Day 4. The first time I let go. Day 4 began with a different kind of brief. No opponents assigned, no scored engagements. Mike stood at the whiteboard and wrote one word in large letters: limits. Today, he said, we're not fighting each other. We're flying solo sorties to explore the F-16's full envelope. High G sustained turns, maximum performance departures, out-of-control recoveries, and high AOA maneuvering. No guns, no missiles, just you and the jet. The goal is to learn what it can really do when you stop holding it back. I felt a knot in my stomach. Back home, this kind of flying was restricted to test pilots or rare emergency procedures training. For line pilots, it was forbidden territory. Too risky. Too likely to end in a mishap report. Mike noticed my expression. Hiroshi, you've got the best hands in the group, but hands alone aren't enough. You need to feel the jet, not just fly it. We stepped to the jets under a cloudless sky. The Nevada range stretched endlessly below, empty and forgiving, a perfect place to push boundaries without consequences beyond pride. My call sign for the day? Solo. No wingman, just me, the Viper, and the vast desert sky. Takeoff was routine. Climb to 25,000 feet, clear the area, then begin. First task, sustained 9G at corner velocity. I'd pulled 9G before, briefly, in emergencies or demonstrations, never sustained. I rolled in, throttle full, built to 420 knots, then hauled back on the stick. G built rapidly, 5, 7, 8, 8.5. The onset was brutal. Vision tunneled, grunting hard to keep blood in my brain. The jet strained, airframe creaking, HUD symbology steady. I held it. 30 seconds. 45. A full 180 degrees, then 360. Airspeed bled predictably, but the turn rate was incredible, tighter than anything I'd allowed myself before. Recovery was easy. Unload, breathe, rebuild energy. Radio check. Knock it off. Good sustained 9G. How'd it feel? Stable, I replied, surprised. The jet hadn't complained as much as I expected. Next, high AOA maneuvering. Mike guided from the ground radar controller. Slow to 200 knots, configure clean, then pull to max AOA. Let the nose slice. Feel the departure when it comes. I throttled back, extended speed brakes briefly, then eased the stick aft. AOA climbed. 15, 20, 22 degrees. The nose rose high above the horizon, airspeed decaying fast. Buffet started. Light at first, then heavy. The jet rocked side to side, yaw rate building. My instinct screamed, recover now. Unload, roll level, accelerate. But Mike's voice was calm. Stay with it. Let it talk to you. Rudder to control yaw, throttle to manage energy. I forced my hands light on the stick, feet active on the pedals. The Viper departed, nose sliced left, then right, inverted momentarily.
Not violent, but uncontrolled. For the first time in my career, I was out of control on purpose. Panic flickered, brief, sharp. Then I remembered the recovery checklist. Hands off stick momentarily for fly-up, then neutral controls. Throttle idle if needed, then unload. The jet recovered almost eagerly, nose dropping, airspeed building. I pulled out at 15,000 feet, heart pounding. "How was it?" Mike asked. "Controllable," I admitted, "more than I thought." We progressed. Pedal turns at high AOA, slow speed nose authority, energy recovery from near stall. Each time I pushed further than ever before, the jet responded. It didn't betray me. It gave feedback. Buffet as warning, yaw as information, recovery as forgiveness. The fear I expected didn't come. Instead, there was exhilaration. The Viper was alive under me, communicating in vibrations and sounds and G. Final task, a full vertical recovery from intentional departure. I climbed to 30,000 feet, slowed to 150 knots, then pulled abruptly to maximum AOA. The jet snapped into a flat spin, deliberate, controlled. World rotating slowly. Desert, sky, desert, sky. Standard recovery. Power idle, rudder opposite spin, stick forward. Wait. The rotation stopped. Nose dropped. I recovered cleanly at 20,000 feet. I leveled off, breathing hard, but not from fear, from realization. The jet hadn't fought me. It had waited for me to listen. I called, "Recovery complete, jet stable." Mike's voice came back, quiet satisfaction. "Welcome to the real F-16, Hiroshi. You just let it talk to you for the first time." I flew back to the base in silence, the desert sliding beneath me. The Viper felt different now, lighter on the controls, more responsive, not because the aircraft had changed, but because I had stopped fighting it. Debrief was one-on-one with Mike in a small office. He pulled up my telemetry. The trace was no longer smooth and conservative. It danced. High G, low energy, high AOA spikes, recoveries. "You used 95% of the envelope today. Yesterday it was 70. How did it feel?" I searched for words. Alive. The jet, it wasn't resisting. It was helping. He nodded. "That's trust. You finally stopped treating it like a machine that might betray you and started treating it like a partner that won't if you listen." I thought back 20 years. Every sortie, every formation, every scramble, I had flown with absolute control, never allowing deviation. I had prided myself on never departing, never losing parameters, never needing recovery. I had never truly trusted the aircraft to handle what it was designed for. And in doing so, I had never trusted myself to handle it either. Mike leaned forward. "You've got the skill, always did, but skill without trust is just choreography. Today, you started flying." That night, I didn't review logs or study diagrams. I sat outside the barracks, watching stars emerge over the desert. For the first time since arriving, I felt something new. Not frustration, not doubt, but possibility. I had let go, just a little, and the jet hadn't let me down. It had carried me. 20 years of rigid control, and in one afternoon of deliberate risk, I had glimpsed what I'd been missing. The crack in my old philosophy was now a fissure. Tomorrow we would return to fighting. I wondered, hoped, if this new feel would translate against another pilot. For the first time, I wasn't sure I would dominate. And strangely, that didn't feel like defeat. It felt like beginning.
Day 5. Pride shattered. Day 5 marked the escalation. Dissimilar air combat training, DACT. No longer pure 1v1 F-16 against F-16. Now we flew mixed formations. F-16s versus aggressor F-15s and F-18s flown by the resident squadron, plus some T-38s simulating low observable threats. Multiple engagements, beyond visual range setups flowing into within visual range knife fights. The brief was intense. Mike laid out the scenarios: large force employment with radar sorting, then merges into close-in dogfights. "Commit to your decisions," he said. "No half measures today." I felt ready. Yesterday's envelope exploration had changed something fundamental.
The jet no longer felt like a tool I had to restrain. It felt like an extension that responded when I asked boldly. I had pulled sustained 9G, danced at high AOA, recovered from departures. For the first time since arriving, quiet confidence replaced arrogance. We launched in a four-ship of Vipers. I was lead of the second element, blue air against red. First engagement, BVR setup at 35,000 feet. I acquired early, sorted the threats, committed to a flank. My radar discipline, honed from years of real intercepts over the East China Sea, paid off. I called the shot, Fox 3 at maximum range on an F-15 Aggressor. Simulated kill. The Eagle died early. Flow to visual. 2v2 remaining against 2 FA-18s. Merge. I came off hot, aggressive turn into the lead Hornet. Pulled hard, 9G from the start, allowed airspeed to bleed, used the new nose authority I discovered yesterday. High AOA slice, forced the Hornet defensive early. My element wingmen cleaned up the trailer. Double kill. I felt it, the rush. This was the flying I'd been missing, decisive, bold, trusting the jet. Radio chatter, good kill, Tora, nice commit. Second engagement, offensive start for us. 4v3. I led the charge. Early turn, energy down the throat, then vertical split to bracket the red formation. Razor on my wing executed perfectly. We sorted, shot 2 Fox 3s, then flowed into the merge, 4v1 against the surviving aggressor, an F-15. I took the lead. Aggressive lag pursuit, bled energy to stay with his climb, then high AOA pull to point the nose as he descended. Guns track. Kill. 3 engagements, 3 wins for Blue Air, all with me central to the kills. Debrief after the first sortie was positive. Mike nodded approval. That's the pilot we knew was in there. You committed early, used the envelope, dictated the fight. Razor slapped my shoulder. Hell yeah, Tora, you're dangerous now. I allowed myself a small smile. Finally, they were seeing what I had always known. Experience and discipline, when unleashed, dominate. But pride, as the saying goes, comes before the fall. Afternoon sortie, larger package, 6v6 with electronic warfare support simulated, defensive start for Blue, red air inbound hot. I was flight lead this time. The merge was chaotic, multiple bandits, high closure rates. I sorted well initially, called defensive breaks, positioned the flight for counterattack. Then pressure mounted. Red air committed hard, flanking us. In the chaos, old instincts flickered. A bandit closed fast on my 6. Instead of trusting the new aggressive mindset, hard reversal into him, bleeding energy for nose position, hesitation flashed. I unloaded to extend, preserving energy, looking for the safe re-engagement. Classic conservative move, the one that had lost me every fight the first days. The aggressor pilot, callsign Bandit, a grizzled aggressor instructor with thousands of hours, saw it instantly. He accepted the energy trap, pulled vertical, then floated high AOA to saddle in as I rebuilt speed. Fox 2, kill on me. My wingman tried to support, but got sorted out next. Blue Air lost the engagement. Next set, 2v2 against Bandit and his wingman. I tried to recover the aggressive feel. First merge, good commit, forced 1 defensive. But as the fight developed, pressure built again. 2 bandits bracketing. I found myself in a neutral setup against Bandit. He came hard. I defended with a high G break, 9G, good rate, but kept parameters comfortable. Airspeed of 350, AOA controlled. He bled everything, pulled into the phone booth, and outpointed me for a guns kill. Second merge. I tried harder, accepted lower energy, higher AOA. Briefly gained advantage, nose on for a snapshot. But under stress, when he reversed aggressively, old habit returned. I disengaged slightly to rebuild, seeking the safe position. He punished it instantly. Guns kill again. I landed after the second sortie with 2 kills in the morning and 4 losses in the afternoon. My hands were steady, but inside, turmoil. Debrief was brutal, not in tone, but in honesty. Mike played the tapes. Morning engagements, aggressive traces, decisive commits, wins. Afternoon, flashes of boldness, then reversion to conservative when pressed. You started trusting the jet, Mike said, but when the heat came on, when survival instinct kicked in, you fell back to the old pattern. Extend, preserve, wait for the perfect shot. Bandit, the aggressor who dominated me, spoke up. Major, you've got the tools now. I felt it in the first few fights today. But you don't fully believe yet. When it got hairy, you stopped committing. You went back to surviving instead of winning. Surviving instead of winning. That phrase cut deep. The room cleared slowly. I stayed behind with Mike. I thought I had it, I said quietly. This morning felt right. You did have it, he replied. But 20 years of muscle memory doesn't vanish in 4 days. Under pressure, the old programming took over. He paused, then asked gently, "What were you thinking when you unloaded to extend in that last fight?" I didn't answer immediately. Finally, that I needed to stay alive, rebuild energy, fight another day. He nodded. That's the Japanese doctrine talking. Preserve the force, noble, necessary when you're outnumbered every day. Then he added, but in a knife fight, the pilot who prioritizes survival over victory usually dies. I left debrief in silence. That night was the worst yet, no sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, head in hands, replaying the tapes in my mind. Morning, aggressive, trusting, winning. Afternoon, pressured, hesitant, losing. And worse, the deeper realization. All those years teaching young pilots discipline, risk management, preserve the aircraft. I had taught them to extend when pressed. I had taught them to survive engagements rather than dominate them. How many students had I molded into cautious fighters, excellent at not losing the jet, but incapable of winning the war? If I was still reverting under pressure after 4 days of revelation, how deeply had I ingrained that mindset in others? The pride I had carried into Nellis, undefeated record, legendary instructor, real-world experience against peer threats, lay in pieces. I had tasted victory with the new mindset, brief, intoxicating. Then, when tested, I had retreated to the old and lost. I thought of my squadron back in Naha, young lieutenants scrambling daily against Chinese probes, flying exactly as I had taught them, precise, safe, survivable. Would they hesitate at the critical moment? Would they extend when they should commit? Would they die because I had taught them caution over aggression? The question burned. If I'm still wrong under pressure, I whispered to the empty room, then how many generations after me are also wrong? No answer came, only the desert wind against the window. Day 5 ended not with progress, but with my pride fully shattered, and in its place, something new and painful. Responsibility. For the first time, this wasn't just about me. It was about everyone I had influenced.
Day 6. Redefining what it means to be a fighter pilot. Day 6 was scheduled as a debrief-heavy day. No flying until late afternoon, just a long, deep session in the classified briefing room. The sign on the door read, "Combat Mindset, no recording." Mike opened with a simple statement. Today, we're not talking about tactics, procedures, or even the jet. We're talking about why we fight the way we do. I arrived early, coffee in hand, still raw from yesterday's collapse. The morning victories felt distant. The afternoon reversions under pressure haunted me. I had glimpsed the new way, tasted success, then retreated to the old when it mattered most. The room filled, Razor, Joker, Bandit, Viper, a few other aggressors. Everyone sat in a loose circle. No hierarchy, no rank on display. Mike opened with a simple statement. Today, we're not talking about tactics, procedures, or even the jet. We're talking about why we fight the way we do. I arrived early, coffee in hand, still raw from yesterday's collapse. The morning victories felt distant. The afternoon reversions under pressure haunted me. I had glimpsed the new way, tasted success, then retreated to the old when it mattered most.
The room filled. Razor, Joker, Bandit, Viper, a few other aggressors. Everyone sat in a loose circle. No hierarchy, no rank on display. Mike started with a slide showing two phrases side by side. Japanese core objective, simplified from doctrine, avoid defeat, preserve the force, survive to fight tomorrow. American core objective, achieve decisive victory, impose will on the enemy, win the fight now. He let it sit on the screen. In Japan, he said, turning to me, you face a peer adversary every single day. Outnumbered, outproduced, on the defensive strategically. Your doctrine makes perfect sense. Don't lose aircraft you can't replace quickly. Don't trade lives when deterrence is the goal. Fly smart, disengage if necessary, live to intercept again tomorrow. I nodded. It was exactly what I had always believed. But in a dogfight, he continued, those two philosophies collide. The pilot who is thinking, survive this engagement, is already reacting. The pilot who is thinking, win this engagement, is acting. Bandit spoke next. I've flown against exchange pilots from many nations. The ones trained to avoid defeat are brilliant at not dying, until the day they have to win. Then they hesitate at the exact moment hesitation kills. Razor added, you saw it yesterday, Tora. Morning, you were trying to win. Afternoon, when the heat came, you shifted to don't lose the jet, and you lost the fight. The room was quiet. Mike clicked to the next slide, a quote from an anonymous USAF fighter weapons school instructor. A fighter pilot is not a caretaker of the aircraft, he's a weapons system himself. He let that sink in, then looked directly at me. Hiroshi, you've spent 20 years being an outstanding caretaker. Perfect formations, flawless energy management, zero incidents. You keep the jet pristine, margins large, parameters safe. You preserve the asset. I felt the truth of it like a weight. But in a real fight, the jet isn't the primary weapon. You are. The jet is just the delivery system. If you're caretaking it, you're not weaponizing yourself. Joker spoke softly. When I fly against you now, I feel it. You're still protecting the aircraft more than attacking me. Mike asked the group, what's the difference between a pilot who wants to go home tonight and a pilot who wants to make sure the enemy doesn't? Answers came quickly. One defends energy, the other sacrifices it for position. One waits for the perfect shot, the other takes the first valid one. One avoids the edge, the other lives there. One survives the fight, the other ends it. Then Mike turned back to me. Your culture teaches harmony, discipline, collective responsibility. Admirable, necessary. But in the cockpit, when it's 1 versus 1 and only one walks away, harmony doesn't win. Ruthless commitment does. He showed clips, not from our sorties, but historical gun camera footage. Vietnam MiG kills, Bekaa Valley massacres, Gulf War sweeps. In almost every case, the victor was the pilot who committed earliest, bled energy hardest, accepted the riskiest geometry to get the first shot. The losers? Often technically proficient, energy conserving, waiting for the safe opportunity that never came. I thought of my own scrambles over the East China Sea. Tense shadowing, parallel courses, occasional close passes, but never shots fired. Deterrence, not decision. We had trained for the war we hoped never to fight, outnumbered defense of the homeland. They had trained for the war they had actually fought and might fight again, decisive air superiority to enable everything else. Mike closed the slides. The jet will do whatever you demand of it as long as you demand with conviction. It's designed to be abused in combat, but if you're always protecting it in training, you'll protect it in combat too, and lose. He paused, then said the words that redefined everything for me. You weren't born to be a caretaker, Hiroshi.
You were born to be the weapon. The debrief continued for hours. Stories from combat tours, near misses, lessons paid in blood. No bravado, just honest reflection. I listened more than I spoke. When it ended, we broke for lunch in silence. Afternoon was a single short 1v1 sortie, me against Mike himself. No scoring, no pressure, just fly. I launched with a different mindset, not trying to prove anything, not protecting anything. For the first 3 merges, I committed early, bled energy aggressively, used the envelope I'd explored on day 4, forced him defensive twice. He still killed me all 3 times, experience gap too wide, but the fights were close, dynamic, alive. On the 4th merge, something clicked. He came hard down the throat. I pulled vertical early, traded all energy for nose position, floated at the top in high AOA, then pointed down as he passed below. Guns track on him for 2 full seconds, valid kill parameters. He called, "Knock it off," and laughed over the radio. "That's it, Tora. That's the weapon." We landed. No debrief needed. That evening I walked the flight line again, but differently. No brooding, just quiet acceptance. I'd spent 20 years being the perfect caretaker, safe, disciplined, survivable. Now I understood. That was only half the job. The other half, the decisive half, was becoming the weapon. Avoiding defeat is necessary when you're the smaller force, but winning fights is necessary if you ever want the bigger force to stop coming. The fissure in my old philosophy had become a chasm. 1 day left. I was no longer the same pilot who had arrived arrogant and certain. I was becoming something new. And for the first time, I welcomed it.
Day 7, the most humble flight of my life. I woke on the final full flying day with a strange calm. No fire of arrogance left. No burning need to prove myself. No lingering frustration from the previous day's failures. Just quiet acceptance. 6 days at Nellis had stripped away layer after layer. First my certainty, then my pride, then my philosophy. What remained was raw, exposed, vulnerable, but strangely light. The brief was simple. Capstone 1v1 and 2v2 BFM. No special scenarios, just fly. "Show us who you are today," Mike said, looking straight at me. I nodded. No bravado, no promises. We stepped to the jets under a high, thin overcast, rare for Nevada. The air felt cooler, almost gentle. I climbed into the cockpit of the same Block 50 Viper I'd flown most of the week. Pre-flight, start, taxi, all routine. But as I taxied out, something was different. I didn't run through mental checklists of how to dominate or how to avoid repeating yesterday's mistakes. I just breathed. Takeoff, climb, arming checks. The working area was the same vast desert range. First engagement, 1v1 against Razor. Neutral merge. He came hard, as always. Early turn, aggressive energy bleed. Old me would have met him rate for rate, conserved energy, waited for the mistake. New me, or whatever I was becoming, didn't think. I acted. I pulled vertical early, sacrificed airspeed for altitude and nose position, floated at the top in high AOA, then pointed down as he committed below. He defended well, reversed hard, forced a lugging fight. I stayed committed. No hesitation, no unloading to preserve. We ended in a neutral, low-energy scissors. Phones ringing, guns tracking each other alternately. No kill either way. Knock it off called for fuel. Second merge, offensive start for me. I attacked boldly, down the throat, then hard slice into lag pursuit, bleeding everything to stay with his brake turn. High G, high AOA, Buffett shaking the jet. He countered perfectly, extended slightly, then reversed into me. Pressure mounted, heart rate up. The moment where I had always reverted before. But this time, no retreat. I accepted the low energy,
pulled into the phone booth with him, trusted the recovery I'd practiced on day 4. We merged slow, nose to nose, both fighting for angles. He got the first valid guns track. Kill. I lost the fight. But as we rejoined for RTB, Razor's voice came over. "Damn, Tora, that was the best fight I've had all week. You didn't give me anything easy." I smiled behind the mask. Small, genuine. Afternoon, 2v2 with me leading Joker against Mike and Bandit. Defensive start. They came in committed, flanking us. I called the break, positioned Joker for support, then turned hard into the threat. First merge against Mike, aggressive commit, early vertical, forced him defensive briefly. He recovered masterfully, saddled in on Joker instead. Kill on her. Now, 1v2 against me. Old me would have extended, preserved, tried to disengage and reset. Instead, I turned hard into Bandit, accepted the sandwich, fought for nose position on him while keeping Mike in sight. Bandit punished the commit. High AOA reversal, guns on me quickly. Kill. Then Mike cleaned up the remainder. Double kill on Blue Air. I landed with 3 losses and 1 neutral on the day. Statistically, my worst performance of the week. Yet as I shut down the jet, crew chief chalking the wheels, I felt no sting of defeat. Debrief was short. Mike played selected tapes. My traces, aggressive commits. Full envelope use, no conservative extensions. "You lost every fight today," he said matter-of-factly. The room waited. "But you lost while trying everything new. You committed early, bled energy when needed, stayed in the fight instead of running from it. You never reverted." Razor nodded. "You made us work for every kill. That neutral scissors with me, I was 1 second from being dead if you'd pointed a hair faster." Bandit, who had dominated me days earlier, added, "You're not the same pilot who showed up. That guy would have extended and died boring. Today, you fought like a weapon." Mike looked at me. "On day 1, you flew perfectly and lost every time. Today, you flew imperfectly and finally started learning." He paused, then smiled. "Now you're finally learning." No one clapped or cheered, just nods and handshakes. But those words landed deeper than any victory. I had lost every engagement, and yet for the first time, the F-16 felt truly easy to fly. Not because the jet was simpler or the opponents weaker, because I had stopped forcing it to fly according to my old fears. I no longer pulled the stick to avoid mistakes. I pulled it to win. I no longer managed energy to survive. I managed it to kill. I no longer kept margins to preserve the aircraft. I used the entire envelope because the aircraft could take it, and I finally trusted that it would. That evening, I packed slowly. Flight suit hung in the closet, helmet bag by the door. Tomorrow, ferry flight to a tanker, then commercial home. I walked the flight line one last time as the sun set behind the mountains. Jets parked in rows, canopies glinting. The Viper no longer felt like a machine I had to control perfectly. It felt like a partner I had finally learned to trust. 20 years of flawless, safe, disciplined flying. 7 days to realize it had all been caretaking. 1 humble day of losing every fight while flying freely to begin becoming something more. I thought of my students back home, the lectures I would change, the limits I would push in training, the mindset I would instill. Not caution disguised as wisdom, commitment disguised as nothing, just pure will to win. I turned back towards the barracks, the most humiliating day of flying in my career, and the most liberating. The arrogant major who had arrived was gone. In his place, a pilot beginning finally to learn.
Day 8. The final confession. Departure day. No flying scheduled, just administrative out-processing, a short closing ceremony, and the long journey home. Tanker hop to Travis AFB, then commercial across the Pacific to Misawa, and finally a domestic flight down to my home base. I woke early, packed the last of my belongings into the single duffel bag. The room looked bare now. No flight suit hanging, no helmet bag by the door, no scattered notes from debriefs. Only the faint desert dust on my boots remained as evidence of the week. I walked to the squadron building one last time. The flight line was already active, jets starting, ground crews bustling. Normal day for them, end of an era for me. The closing brief was informal. The squadron commander, a full colonel I'd barely spoken to, thanked the visiting pilots, just me and a Singaporean who'd been on a parallel program, for participating. Certificates were handed out, simple paper, completion of advanced fighter integration training. No medals, no speeches, no photos with flags. Mike pulled me aside afterward in the hallway. "No ceremony," he said, smiling. "That's how we do it. The learning is the reward." I nodded. It was more than I expected. He studied me for a moment. "You came in thinking you had it all figured out. Most do. Few leave admitting they didn't. That's why this week mattered." We shook hands, firm, lingering. "Fly angry when you need to, Hiroshi, but fly honest always." I didn't reply. Words felt inadequate. Razor, Joker, Bandit, and Viper found me at the van to base ops. Quick handshakes, backslaps, promises to meet again in some future red flag or cope whatever. Joker grinned. "You scared the hell out of me on that last day, Tora. Don't stop now." Bandit added, "You've got the fire. Just keep feeding it." I managed a small smile. "I will." The van ride to the flight line was quiet. I watched Nellis recede through the window. Hangars, jets, the endless desert beyond. 7 days ago, I had arrived here certain I would teach these pilots a lesson. Instead, they had dismantled me piece by piece and handed me the tools to rebuild. Boarded a KC-46 for the ferry flight west. I sat alone in the jump seat behind the pilots, watching the Nevada landscape fall away below. As we climbed through 30,000 feet, the desert gave way to clouds, then open sky. In the quiet hum of the tanker, the phrase formed fully in my mind, the one that had been building all week. I whispered it to myself, tasting its weight. I've been flying the wrong way for 20 years. Not exaggerated, not dramatic, just true. I had flown with technical excellence, real-world experience, and unflinching discipline. I had faced peer adversaries in tense skies, led squadrons, trained dozens of pilots. My record was impeccable. And yet, for 20 years, I had been a caretaker, not a weapon. I had prioritized preservation over victory. I had taught caution disguised as wisdom. I had never fully trusted the jet or myself to dance on the edge where real fights are won. What I learned here wasn't American tactics or procedures. Those I could have studied in books. What I learned was radical honesty with the aircraft, with the fight, and most painfully with my own limitations. The Americans didn't win because their jets were better or their pilots younger. They won because they trained to become the decisive element, not just manage the platform. They accepted risk in training to eliminate it in combat. They turned mistakes into mastery. They made the jet an ally, not a subordinate. And in doing so, they became dangerous. I closed my eyes as the tanker droned westward. Memories flashed. The first humiliating losses, the terror of intentional departures, the exhilaration of first listening to the jet, the bitter taste of reverting under pressure, the liberation of finally committing without reservation. 7 days to undo 20 years. Not undo, transcend. I thought of what I would take home. Not new checklists or maneuvers, but a new standard. I would push training limits, safely, progressively, to build trust in the envelope. I would encourage deliberate practice at the edges. I would teach young pilots that survival is necessary, but victory is the goal. I would tell them the jet will forgive honest aggression far more than timid perfection. And most importantly, I would admit my own past errors, openly, without defensiveness, so they could learn from them faster than I did. The KC-46 began descent into Travis, Pacific Ocean ahead. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had flown thousands of hours, pulled countless G, gripped the stick in real intercepts. They felt different now, not because they were stronger, but because they were finally ready to demand more from the jet, from the fight, and from myself. As the California coast appeared below, the final confession settled in my chest, no longer painful, but liberating.
I've been flying the wrong way for 20 years, and now, finally, I was beginning to fly the right way.
The long flight home gave me too much time to think. After refueling over the Pacific, I transferred to a commercial airliner at Travis, JAL flight to Narita, then a domestic hop to Misawa, and finally a short military shuttle down to my home base at Naha, Okinawa. I sat in business class, courtesy of the exchange program, window seat, staring out at endless ocean below. The JASDF patch on my civilian jacket sleeve caught my eye every time I shifted. The rising sun, the wings, the kanji. Symbols of pride, service, defense of the homeland. For the first time in my career, it felt heavy, not from physical weight, but from responsibility. 20 years wearing that patch as the model officer, flawless record, legendary instructor, undefeated in exercises, respected by peers and superiors alike. Now I saw it differently. That patch represented not just my achievements, but everyone who had flown under my guidance, every young pilot I had shaped, every lecture I had given on discipline, risk management, preservation of the force. I had taught them to be caretakers, not weapons, and in doing so, I had potentially left them less prepared for the day when deterrence fails and shots are fired. The week at Nellis replayed in fragments, the initial arrogance, the humiliating losses, the terror of pushing the envelope, the taste of aggressive victory, the bitter reversion under pressure, the final day of committed, if losing, fights. Mike's voice echoed clearest. A fighter pilot is not a caretaker of the aircraft. He's a weapon system himself. I pulled out a small notebook I had bought at the Nellis BX on the last day. Blank pages, no lines. I began writing. Not a report, not a debrief for my chain of command. Just thoughts, commitments. First page. Change begins with honesty. I will admit to my squadron, openly, without qualification, that I have been teaching a limited version of air combat, that my emphasis on absolute safety and error avoidance, while necessary for force preservation, has come at the cost of developing decisive offensive capability. I will tell them about Nellis, about being dominated by younger pilots, about learning to trust the jet, about becoming the weapon. No defensiveness, no national pride excuses, just truth. Second page, training reforms. Progressive envelope expansion in advanced phases, controlled high AOA, departures and recoveries, sustained 9G where safe. Debrief culture shift, mistakes not punished but dissected for learning. Encourage calculated risk in training to eliminate hesitation in combat. Mindset training, separate blocks on offensive commitment versus defensive survival. Teach when each is appropriate. Preservation for strategic deterrence, aggression for tactical decision. Invite aggressor exchanges more frequently. Learn from those who train to win, not just not lose. Third page, personal promise. I will fly angry when needed, not reckless, but committed. I will no longer pull the stick to avoid mistakes, but to impose my will. I will trust the jet, trust my hands, trust the training I will now give others. The aircraft can take it. The pilot must demand it. As the plane began descent into Narita, the Japanese archipelago appeared below, familiar coastline, mountains dusted with early winter snow. Home, but I was returning changed. Customs, baggage claim, the bullet train north to Misawa for the night, then the early shuttle south to Okinawa. I arrived at Nahak Air Base 2 days after leaving Nellis. The humid subtropical air hit me as I stepped off the C-2 transport, a stark contrast to Nevada's dry heat. Palm trees swaying, the distant roar of F-15Js on alert scramble practice. My squadron commander greeted me at the hangar, Colonel Sato, old friend, former instructor of mine. "Welcome back, Major Tanaka. How was the American training?" I paused, looking him in the eye. "Life-changing, sir." He raised an eyebrow. "That good?" "That necessary." He studied me, sensing the shift. "Debrief tomorrow morning with the staff?" "Yes, sir, and I'd like to address the entire squadron afterward if possible." He nodded slowly.
Granted. That night in my quarters, familiar walls, family photos, the faint salt smell of the East China Sea through the window, I unpacked slowly. Flight suit hung in the closet, helmet on the shelf, notebook on the desk. I looked at the patch on the uniform one more time. No longer heavy with unrecognized flaws, now heavy with purpose. The next morning's debrief was professional. Technical observations, procedural comparisons, recommendations for future exchanges. I kept it factual, positive. Then, the squadron assembly. 80 pilots and support personnel in the briefing room. Young lieutenants fresh from training, captains with scrambles under their belts, senior majors like me. I stood at the front, no slides. I returned from Nellis yesterday. I went there expecting to share our expertise. Instead, I learned how limited my own expertise has been. Silence in the room. I have flown over 3,200 hours, led hundreds of real-world intercepts, taught many of you. My record is flawless. I paused. And for 20 years, I have been flying the wrong way. A ripple of surprise. I told them everything. The arrogance, the domination in early fights by younger pilots, the realization about trust, the shift from caretaker to weapon. No defensiveness, no national pride excuses, just truth. I told them about committing aggressively and losing fights, yet learning more in those losses than in all my previous wins. I told them we must change, not abandon our discipline or our defensive doctrine, but add the missing piece, the mindset and skill to win decisively when required. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then a young captain, one of my former students, raised his hand. "Sir, does this mean we'll be pushing harder in training?" "Yes," I said, "progressively, safely, but harder than before. Because the Chinese pilots we face aren't training to survive, they're training to win." Colonel Sato stood. "Major Tanaka will lead a working group to revise our advanced BFM syllabus. Volunteers?" Half the room raised hands. I felt something loosen in my chest. Change wouldn't be easy. Bureaucracy, risk aversion, cultural inertia, all would resist. But it would begin. And I would lead it, not from arrogance, but from humility earned in the Nevada desert. Months later, looking back, I would mark that week at Nellis as the true beginning of my career. The first 20 years, I had been a safe pilot, excellent at preservation, deterrence, discipline. After 7 days in America, I finally began learning how to become a fighter pilot. One who trusts the jet, one who commits without hesitation, one who teaches others to become weapons, not just caretakers. The East China Sea remains tense. Chinese incursions continue. We scramble, shadow, deter. But now, when I lead a 4-ship on alert, we know we are not just surviving the next encounter, we are preparing to win it. And that makes all the difference.